That's good. Okay, there we go. Okay, well, all right. What do you think? Should we? All right. This is.
That picture looks crooked.
Hi, hi, friends. It's Sharon, and I'm here with my mother-in-law, Barb. You can wave now. Yeah. And we're going to start doing a Friday Funny today, and we think she might need a cushion. But do you want to grab the cushion so people can see you? There we go. There we are. Perfect. There.
Oh, way above the air.
This is good.
I need air.
All right, so I'm going to tell her a joke, and we'll just see if it's funny as a Friday Funny. Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
No,
So
I'm listening.
yes. So there was this couple, and it was their 60th birthday. Both of them were born on the same day, and they had married. So it was their anniversary and their birthdays. 60 years old. And God looked upon them and thought, you know, you've been so loyal and sincere to each other, and you're both celebrating 60 years. Why don't I just grant you anything you request? Right? And so he comes to the woman. He says, Ethel, we like that. Ethel, you and Harry here have been together for a very long time, and, you know, you're celebrating the 60th, and I'm just wondering, what is it that you would request from me? And Ethel says, oh, you know what, Lord? Harry and I have always wanted to go traveling. We wanted to travel the world. So, you know, yes, that's my request. I would like to travel the world. Okay. And so God goes, poof. And in her hands are tickets for a cruise and airplane flights and hotel rooms. That's grand, right? Mm-hmm. So very excited that they're going to be traveling together. And so then God says to Harry, what is it that you would like on this special day? And Harry goes, kind of looks down at his feet. He's going, oh, I shouldn't even say this. It's terrible. And God says, no, go ahead. Just say, say what you want. And he says, well, I'd like to be married to a woman 30 years younger than me. And God says, poof, you're 90 years old. Oh boy, have a good weekend. In life, sometimes we fall, and we have to get ourselves back up again, just to go back to the struggle, again and again, to climb further and further, higher and higher, only to fall again. The road to Emmaus is a symbol of the Christian life. The story is about ordinary despair and ordinary Monday morning drudgery. It's a story about meeting a stranger, hearing his words of comfort, sitting down at a table and sharing a meal. This is a story about the meaning of Easter for us, and it enables us to see that the risen Lord gives hope and joy when all we see is disappointment, discouragement, and despair. The road to Emmaus is really the labyrinth to Emmaus. There certainly is a few turns in this story, like on the labyrinth. Luke is the only one of the 4 gospel writers to include this story, and it's the story of 2 disciples who, after the crucifixion and resurrection of Christ, walked the 7 miles from Jerusalem to the village of Emmaus. Part of this journey, their spiritual eyes, are closed, and that is when Jesus meets them on the road to Emmaus. They do not know it is him. Likely this is because they are disenfranchised. They were feeling defeat, doubt, discouragement, and despair. They were followers of Jesus, and they were confused, afraid, and bewildered about what happened on Good Friday. Their teacher, their hope, had experienced a horrible death, defeated and exposed to all who saw him, beaten, dragging the cross, and then hung upon it. Like the other disciples, Cleopas, one of the people on the road to Emmaus, hid as Jesus was crucified. But who is the other disciple? Who is the companion of Cleopas? Of that, the one that was traveling with him? Many sources say that it is Mary, his wife. Where does this come from? Well, the only other time Cleopas is mentioned is in John 19:25. Near the cross of Jesus stood his mother's sister, Mary, the wife of Cleopas, and Mary Magdalene. 4 women stand at the foot of the cross. Mary, the wife of Cleopas, is there too. Yes, John spells Cleopas differently than Luke, but the spelling of names in antiquity, and often in our time, can vary, and here it refers to the same person. And it would seem that Cleopas and his wife Mary were followers of Jesus, as she was mentioned by John as being at the foot of the cross. As we look at the other Gospel writers, we see that Mary is the mother of James, as she is referred to. Mark also tells us in Mark 16:1 that when the Sabbath was over, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome bought the spices so that they might go to anoint Jesus' body. And so Mary, Cleopas' wife, was there with Mary Magdalene at the tomb when they found the body missing. She would have known that Jesus was resurrected, and she would have gone back to tell the disciples, and her husband would have been there as well, holed up with them. After this, she and her husband Cleopas are walking the road together to Emmaus and talking about the death of Jesus. Yet even knowing that Christ's tomb was empty didn't seem to raise their spirits. It only seemed to confuse them more. They had hoped that Jesus would be the one to set Israel free. Cleopas said, "We had hoped," and that's a past tense. They had lost hope. Have you ever felt that way? As a rare person today, that isn't at least a little bit down because of the isolation of COVID-19. It would be even harder if you were dealing with a loved one's death, disease, addiction, maybe divorce, money problems. How can we cope with all of this constantly negative news? Not only the virus, but 22 people in Nova Scotia murdered by a man dressed as an RCMP officer, a wolf in sheep's clothing. It is easy to despair like this couple walking to Emmaus, and then a stranger appears. "What are you discussing?" Jesus asks, and the two stop in their tracks, incredulous. Essentially, they retort, "Were you born in a barn? Have you not heard?" Cleopas said, "Are you the only visitor to Jerusalem who does not know the things that have happened there in these days?" The man replied, "What things?" "Well, concerning Jesus of Nazareth, a man who was a prophet, mighty indeed, and word before God and all the people." The response of Cleopas and Mary is similar to all people who are grieving. We look at the rest of the world in astonishment. Everyone is still going on with their lives. "Where have you been, man? Under a rock?" And Cleopas pours out the story of Jesus' death. Jesus listens intently, never letting on who he is. Their spiritual eyes remain closed. Jesus did not correct them regarding his perceived ignorance. He merely asks them that they tell him more. He lets them tell their story of grief. Jesus listens to their stories, draws their story out, pays attention to them before he tells any stories of his own. This is a God who listens before speaking. It is as if Jesus knew they needed to talk and to tell him. He regarded their lament as important and worth being heard, even if they don't quite have the story right. But Jesus does not interrupt. He does not intrude on their lament. In fact, he asks them to tell him more. The lengthy conversation between them is deliberate on Jesus' part. He knows the story must be told. He knows that the pain must be shared. He knows that there are no shortcuts to getting out of the pain we feel. It takes a slow meandering. We need to tell how bad we hurt, how bad it looks, how lost we feel, how dismal it is, and how it may possibly never, never be the same. Jesus knows this, and so when he meets them, he listens. If we do not touch the center of our sorrow, of our frustration, of our fear, if we do not find our way to wail and to wear sackcloth, then we do not meet the sunrise on the other side of darkness, and we cut short the story of our deliverance. Like the labyrinth, it is a path that cannot be rushed. It takes time. It is a meandering. It can sometimes be annoying if you're keeping watch on and checking on the time, but that is the precise point. The labyrinth is meant to alter your normal pace. It is not an A to B path. It is not efficient. It is not a maze. It does not have dead ends. The winding path will always take you to the center. It always begins where it ends, and it ends where it begins. there is a sense of hope. A sense of hope that if you stay on the path, if you continue pressing on, that there is beauty still along the way. Cleopas and his wife on the road to Emmaus tell Jesus one story. A grief story, a disappointed dream story, a bellyache story. And Jesus takes the story into himself with God attentive ears, and then he tells a different one. That is, they think it is a different one, an old story they've heard before about their people, about the ups and downs of God's deliverance and their denial, the ups and downs of Exodus and exile, of prophets and promises, of sinful kings and unexpected heroes. But really, Jesus is taking the story and weaving it into the fabric of this one. He is reminding them of just how many times God's people have been disappointed and also confused, lost, wandering, plundered, pensive. He is reminding them how many times God's people have stumbled into deliverance, mercy, and help. How many times angels appeared when one was on the brink of death. How many times babies were born to the barren. How many times flood and food fell from heaven upon the famished. It is a long, meandering story that approaches a happily ever after ending, then gets jerked right back towards despair and conflict. While such meandering may not take a good Hallmark movie, this kind of labyrinth journey to Emmaus resonates deeply with the human story, and in it we recognize ourselves. I want you to imagine something with me. You may even want to close your eyes. Imagine that you are standing at the entrance to a labyrinth, and you've journeyed a long way already just to get there. You figure you have to walk this one alone, but suddenly someone is there with you whom you do not immediately recognize. What were you thinking about on your way through this meandering path? He asked kindly, as if your thoughts had something interesting to tell him. You hesitate. You're not sure you want him to know. You feel half naked, exposed, and shameful to say it out loud, your grief. But you're half angry too, that he can't just tell what it is that you're carrying. Can't he see how weighed down you are? Then why is he smiling? You freeze for a moment. Don't you know these things? You ask him incredulously. He kind of looks as if maybe he does know, but he asks you anyways. What things? So you begin to tell him. You surprise yourself how much pours forth once you begin walking. You do not have the eloquence of a psalmist, but turns out you do have the audacity of one, and with no more reservation you launch straight into a biblical-sized lament, though you would never in a million years think to call this complaint a prayer. You talk and talk and talk. Seems like you're wandering all over the place, going in circles, getting lost, but you are never lost. You're following the path of your own story, and it is taking you somewhere, though you do not know it. You are amazed that this man is still listening to all you have to say, and all you have to feel, and all you have to question. At one point, maybe at the center, or maybe at the fringe, you begin to weep, and he holds you in a long silence. Then he asks, "May I tell you a story?" Yes, you shrug through sniffles. And he begins to tell a different story, but it feels sort of like you're trudging back over that same path you just walked, relaying the stones. It's not your story, and yet you recognize yourself within it. Sometimes, for a brief second, you look into his face and you think to yourself, I've seen him somewhere before. But the instinct passes, and he is endemic to you once again. You walk and he talks, and you begin to feel the sensation in your chest like a slow and tender burning. Like you're coming alive inside your heart. You cannot quite explain it, cannot quite define it, but something is happening to you. You offer him food, not knowing that all food comes from him. You just offer it because something in you is hoping he'll stick around for just a bit longer. Please linger, you're asking, by offering a loaf. And he takes it and breaks it and blesses it and shares it. And then you realize he is not a stranger at all. He is the embodiment of all your hopes. He is alive. and He is with you. Thanks be to God.